They say airports are crossroads of life where destinies collide in the swirling rush of arrivals and departures. But sometimes, beneath the hum of engines and the echoes of final boarding calls, a drama unfolds that no one saw coming. Picture Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport, on a blistering summer morning alive with crowds and expectations. A woman stands at a private hangar door, sweat trickling at her temples as an arrogant manager blocks her way, demanding she wait outside. He has no idea who she really is, and in the next explosive moments, he's about to learn too late the magnitude of his mistake. Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport, is arguably the busiest airport in the world, its terminals surging with passengers from every corner of the globe. On a typical day, the building hums with layered melodies, flight announcements overhead, rolling suitcases against polished floors, and the rhythmic beeps of scanner machines. But it isn't just inside the terminal that stories unfold. Beyond the commercial gates and the clamoring throng of travelers, there's a quieter section reserved for private aviation, a place of secret deals, hush-hush transactions, and the wealthy few who can afford a private plane. On a scorching August morning, the tarmac shimmered beneath the relentless Georgia sun. A large Boeing 737 lumbered by after landing heading toward its assigned gate, but on the far side of the airport grounds lay a series of smaller hangars and FBO's fixed base operators. Their private jets gleamed in the sunlight bearing tail insignias from around the world. Limousines idled waiting for VIPs. Uniformed staff buzzed around fueling jets or unloading baggage. The faint smell of jet fuel mixed with the warm, heavy aroma of fresh tarmac. Standing under the shade of a high corrugated awning was Alexis Monroe, tall, poised, and undeniably elegant. She was in her late 30s, with skin the color of smooth mahogany and hair braided back into an intricate crown. Her eyes sparkled with determination and intelligence. Dressed in a fitted navy blue pantsuit that accentuated her long frame, she looked like she belonged on the cover of a business magazine. But this morning her expression was one of restrained impatience. Next to her, rummaging through a sleek leather briefcase, was Trent Bailey, her longtime friend and personal attorney. He adjusted his glasses and pulled out a sheaf of documents. "Just remember," Trent murmured, keeping his voice low. "We have a meeting with the FBO's operations manager in half an hour. If everything checks out, you can finalize the takeover. You'd be the official owner of this entire hangar and all its subleases." A faint smile crept onto Alexis's lips. "I've worked years for this moment," she said quietly. "Sometimes I still can't believe it." "Well, believe it," Trent said with a grin. "You've earned every bit of it." The decision to purchase a private aviation hangar at Hartsfield-Jackson was not made on a whim. Alexis had spent the last decade building a Fortune 500 logistics empire, specializing in cold chain transportation and specialized cargo shipping. Her success had brought wealth connections and influence. Yet she remained grounded by her humble beginnings, a once little girl from a gritty Atlanta neighborhood who had grown up watching planes overhead, dreaming of the day she'd soar beyond the limitations that once confined her. She had arrived at the smaller private airplane gate near the prospective hangar she was about to take over, expecting a brief introduction to the local staff. However, the manager she was supposed to meet, Brandon Fitzgerald, was nowhere in sight. The clock was ticking, and Alexis wasn't one to tolerate delays, especially on a day as critical as this. But for the moment, she was satisfied to wait with Trent, certain her day was about to take a positive, life-changing turn. She was right about life-changing, but not in the way she expected. Time dragged. After 20 minutes, no sign of Brandon Fitzgerald. Staff members and crew passed by the awning, occasionally glancing at Alexis and Trent with curiosity. A few recognized Alexis from business headlines. Her net worth had been a subject of speculation, and her philanthropic work in Atlanta was widely applauded, but no one approached. A black SUV finally pulled up. Out stepped a tall, broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s, wearing dark aviator sunglasses. His hair was cropped short, and his posture exuded confidence, verging on arrogance. He scanned the lot and seemed displeased by the intense sun. That must be Brandon, Trent noted, tucking away the documents. Finally, Alexis muttered, stepping forward to greet him. Brandon removed his sunglasses and took one sweeping look at Alexis before shifting his gaze dismissively to Trent. His entire demeanor screamed impatience. "Excuse me," Alexis said politely. "Mr. Fitzgerald?" He looked back at her, brow furrowed. "Brandon Fitzgerald?" "Yes," he said curtly. "And you are?" "Alexis Monroe," she replied, holding out her hand. He didn't accept it. Instead, he lifted his chin in a near challenge. "You the new hire? Or are you waiting for someone?" he asked. Trent opened his mouth to speak, but Alexis placed a gentle hand on his arm to hold him back. There was no need to cause a scene. She decided to be straightforward. "I have a meeting with you," she said. "We spoke on the phone last week about I talk on the phone with a lot of people." Brandon interrupted brusquely. He adjusted the collar of his crisp white shirt, flustered by the heat and the nuisance of meeting strangers he hadn't carefully vetted. "But if you don't mind, Miss Monroe, I have a very busy schedule. So if you're here for a pilot or staff position, you can wait inside with the others." Something prickled inside Alexis, an echo of all the times she had been dismissed due to her skin color, her gender, or the combination of both. She squared her shoulders and kept her tone even. "I'm not here to apply for anything," she clarified. "I'm here because we have a scheduled meeting about the property. I believe you wanted to discuss the lease terms and staff transitions." Brandon's expression darkened with a flicker of irritation. He glanced at Trent as if hoping for some explanation. Trent simply met his gaze evenly, his posture calm but firm. "There must be a misunderstanding," Brandon finally said. "I'm expecting the new investor some top-level buyer from out of state. That's definitely not you." Alexis's jaw tightened. She suppressed the urge to correct him more forcefully. "Well, she said the new investor is from right here in Atlanta, and I am who you're expecting." Brandon uttered a short, humorless laugh. I doubt that he said, crossing his arms. "Listen, there's a lounge inside the main building. Why don't you wait there? I have real business to attend to." He turned away, signaling the conversation was over. Trent bristled. "Excuse me, Mr. Fitzgerald." "But—" Brandon's voice crackled with impatience. "Ma'am, sir, whoever you are, this is a restricted area. If you're not staff or an authorized visitor, you can't just wander around." The manager rummaged through his smartphone. "I have a call in 2 minutes with someone who claims to be the prospective buyer. She's apparently a big shot. So if you don't mind," with a dismissive wave, he gestured for them to move away, as though scolding misbehaving children. It was a direct affront, and Alexis felt her pulse hammer in her veins. She inhaled, reminding herself not to lose composure. "Let's go inside," she said quietly to Trent. "We'll see how far his ignorance takes him." For a moment, Trent looked ready to lash out. But Alexis's calm presence steadied him. Together they walked toward the nearby building, a small administrative office that served the private hangars. As Alexis stepped through the door, she sensed the eyes of staff watching her. She'd been subject to prejudice before, but the feeling never got easier to endure. This time, however, she had a trump card in hand, and Brandon's humiliating dismissal would not go unanswered. Long before Alexis Monroe stood poised to buy a private aviation hangar at one of the world's busiest airports, she was a spirited girl growing up in a modest two-bedroom house in southwest Atlanta. Her mother, Clara Monroe, juggled 2 jobs, cleaning offices early in the mornings and serving in a diner by evening. Alexis's father, a truck driver, spent long stretches on the road, sending back what money he could. Despite these hardships, the Monroe household was rich in love, laughter, and ambition. One day Alexis was 12 years old, perched on the crumbling curb outside her home, gazing at the flight path overhead. Planes roared above, descending toward Hartsfield-Jackson. She used to dream about where they came from, Paris, London, Los Angeles, and imagine the stories of the people inside. She promised herself that one day she'd board flights not out of necessity or emergency, but out of freedom to explore the world. She excelled in school thanks to her iron will and a voracious appetite for reading. While her classmates whispered that the odds were stacked against her, poor black female, she refused to be overshadowed by cynicism. She was accepted into a specialized STEM high school program, where she discovered a love for engineering and design. Though her peers teased her for her seriousness, her determination never wavered. In college, she studied industrial engineering, forging alliances with mentors who noticed her brilliance. She landed an internship with a major logistics company, soared in her role, and eventually launched her own startup focusing on specialized cold chain shipping, ensuring perishable and medical supplies arrived globally without spoiling. The venture thrived. Within a decade, that small enterprise became Monroe Global Logistics, employing thousands and securing contracts with major pharmaceutical companies. Despite the success, Alexis faced numerous instances of prejudice. Boardrooms, vendor negotiations, even staff dinners everywhere she turned, she sensed the undercurrent of doubt, the subtle jabs. Are you sure you can handle the contract scale? Do you have a silent partner? You run this alone. Each time she politely but firmly proved her worth, with results turning skeptics into grudging admirers. Still, she believed in leading by example rather than confrontation. She used her growing influence to establish scholarships for disadvantaged youth, especially focusing on women of color who aspired to enter STEM fields. Over time, her philanthropic efforts and savvy business acumen earned her appearances on business magazine covers. She frequented panels about women's leadership and minority-led entrepreneurship. Yet, at her core, she remained the little girl from southwest Atlanta who looked at planes with wonder. Her love for aviation never waned. She took private pilot lessons in her late 20s, eventually earning her pilot's license. Still, she had bigger dreams to own and manage an aviation hub that catered to private and corporate flights, bridging her logistics empire with the heart of global air travel. The opportunity presented itself at Hartsfield-Jackson when an established hangar operator decided to sell. Alexis, flush with success, jumped at the chance. She outbid other investors, most of whom assumed a different buyer would win. But behind her confident smile was the memory of every dismissive comment, every raised eyebrow, every "Are you sure?" fueling her unwavering determination. As Alexis and Trent entered the small administrative office, the air conditioning offered immediate relief from the sweltering heat. The receptionist, a young woman named Kelly, greeted them with a friendly smile. She recognized Alexis from a recent interview on a business network, but hesitated, uncertain if she should mention it. "Good morning," Kelly said. How may I help you? Alexis smiled politely. We're here to see Mr. Fitzgerald. Kelly nodded, glancing at the schedule. He's in a call right now. May I ask what this is regarding? Before Alexis could respond, Brandon Fitzgerald himself stormed in, phone still glued to his ear. He ended the call abruptly upon seeing them. You again? He barked. He gave Kelly a pointed look. I told you, Ms. Monroe, the person I'm meeting is scheduled to arrive any minute now. I just spoke with her staff. Trent's lips parted in surprise. He looked at Alexis questioningly. Alexis raised an eyebrow. It seemed Brandon had no clue the staff he spoke to was likely someone from her own company, using the official signatory name A. Monroe Holdings. Perhaps they had referred to her more formally, causing Brandon's confusion. Brandon turned to Kelly. Did Ms. Thompson from A. Monroe Holdings call Kelly checked her computer? Yes, sir. She confirmed Ms. Monroe's arrival. So I believe. He waved Kelly off. Keep me updated, he snapped, and then stared at Alexis and Trent. I'll ask you one last time to wait outside or in the lounge. You're cluttering our administrative area. A flicker of anger shot through Alexis's eyes. She stood her ground. This is an official meeting, Brandon, she said, using his first name. If you would just listen. He grunted. Yeah, we'll see about that. And stormed deeper into the office corridors, leaving her standing there, stunned by the outright rudeness. Kelly was mortified. I'm so sorry, she whispered, leaning in. He's usually not this aggressive. I don't know what got into him. It's quite all right, Alexis said, a gentle but firm edge to her voice. We'll wait here for a little while longer. In the corner, Trent tapped out a text message to Ms. Thompson, Alexis's executive assistant, asking her to confirm they'd arrived. Alexis had no intention of chasing Brandon around the office begging for a meeting. She was the investor after all. Sooner or later he'd realize it. And as fate would have it, the next half hour would unravel a series of events that would expose much more than Brandon's poor manners. A confrontation was brewing, and once it exploded, there would be no turning back. Half an hour later, Alexis and Trent still sat in the small waiting area. Kelly offered them water, coffee, and refreshments, which they politely declined. The hum of conversation filtered through the corridor as staff members chatted about flight schedules and fueling logs. Every so often, the name Monroe drifted into earshot, followed by hushed tones. News was spreading, though no one seemed certain of the details. At last, Brandon returned. He stiffened when he saw Alexis and Trent calmly occupying the chairs. His expression was a mix of confusion and aggravation. You're still here, he demanded. We are, Alexis answered, standing up. She refused to shrink under his condescending glare. And we're not leaving until we've had our meeting. He gave a half scoff, half laugh. Well, that's going to be a problem, because as I said, I'm meeting with the new owner soon, and I don't have time for just then. Kelly stepped forward, her eyes wide. Mr. Fitzgerald, Ms. Thompson, from A. Monroe Holdings, just called to say Ms. Monroe is in our lobby. She glanced nervously between Alexis and Brandon. That means... Brandon shot her a warning look. I know what it means. He turned to Alexis, suspicion dawning. What kind of joke is this? Trent stood next to Alexis, arms folded in a protective stance. No joke, he said coolly. My client, Ms. Alexis Monroe, is the official buyer. She has full ownership rights as soon as the last round of paperwork is signed. The wave of realization that washed over Brandon's face was almost comedic. His eyes darted to Alexis, then to Kelly and back again. Sweat beaded on his forehead. You, He swallowed hard. "You're the new owner." Alexis nodded, her voice calm. "Yes. The final documents from my council have been with you for a week now, Mr. Fitzgerald. Today we finalize the purchase of the hangar, including all subleases and management contracts." Brandon's composure cracked, replaced by a frantic attempt to regain control. I wasn't informed," he stammered. "Your assistant mentioned A. Monroe Holdings, but I assumed someone else. I apologize if there's been any confusion." His sudden shift in tone was jarring. Gone was the blustering bravado. In its place was a man fighting panic, realizing he might have offended the very person who would soon become his boss. Yet a flicker of resentment lingered in his eyes, as though unwilling to fully concede that Alexis could be the real decision-maker. Trent glanced at Alexis, who returned a cool, unwavering stare. "Confusion can happen," she said, deliberately, choosing a measured response. "But let's be clear, I'm not here to be disrespected. Shall we move to a conference room?" Brandon hesitated, glancing around to see if any staff were watching. Kelly had discreetly busied herself with paperwork, though it was obvious she was listening intently. In a muted voice, Brandon nodded. "Of course. Follow me," and led them down the hallway into a modest conference room. Inside the conference room, Alexis took a seat at the head of the table with Trent to her right. Brandon fumbled with a stack of papers, his demeanor painfully awkward as he tried to appear professional. "Shall we begin?" Alexis asked, raising an eyebrow. Brandon cleared his throat, forcing a tight smile. "Yes, Ms. Monroe. I have the documents here. There are a few minor issues to discuss regarding existing staff and certain operational protocols. We can go over those line by line." Trent opened his briefcase, retrieving their own copies. Alexis allowed Brandon to drive the conversation, carefully watching him for signs of sabotage or resentment. The tension crackled in the air like a muted electrical storm. As Brandon rattled off the details about staff rosters, reassignments, and hangar maintenance, Alexis's mind drifted. She couldn't shake the image of him standing outside, dismissing her out of hand, telling her to wait outside as though she were an unwelcome intruder. This was the type of discrimination she had battled her entire life. Even now, as a self-made millionaire with the power to purchase an entire hangar, some people failed to see past her skin color and assumptions. Finally, Brandon paused, tapping a paragraph on his document. "The only critical point here is that staff must be notified at least 30 days before any significant managerial changes. So if you plan to replace me, Ms. Monroe, you'll need to follow that protocol." He said it with a sneer, as though challenging her. Alexis locked eyes with him. "I've made no decisions about staffing changes yet," she said calmly. "My intention is to ensure a smooth transition. Those who do their jobs well have nothing to worry about." Brandon's nostrils flared as he tried to hide his unease. Clearly he was bracing for the worst likely termination. Yet Alexis didn't want a short-sighted move. She believed in fairness, even if Brandon had shown her little respect. Replacing a manager at a busy airport hangar wasn't a trivial task. It demanded someone experienced with complex aviation logistics. "We need to schedule a meeting with all your direct reports tomorrow," Alexis added. "I want to introduce myself and hear any concerns." Brandon tried to keep his voice steady. "That should be fine, Ms. Monroe." Before anyone could say more, Kelly knocked lightly on the door. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, poking her head in. "Ms. Monroe, Ms. Thompson just arrived. She's in the lounge with the notary." "Great," Alexis said, rising to her feet. She shot Brandon a meaningful look. "Let's finalize these documents, Mr. Fitzgerald." He stood as well, though his posture was rigid. Of course. In that moment, Alexis felt a potent mix of relief and lingering frustration. The day she had dreamed of was finally here. She'd own a key piece of infrastructure at her hometown's international airport. Yet the journey of acceptance of commanding the respect she rightfully deserved remained ongoing. And judging by the cold hostility emanating from Brandon Fitzgerald, their relationship would not be an easy one. They moved to the lounge, a stylishly furnished space designed to impress clients with plush chairs and a panoramic view of the runway. On a table near the window stood an array of pens, papers, and a small tray of refreshments. Ms. Thompson, an impeccably organized woman in her 50s, beamed at Alexis. Beside her was a notary public prepared to witness the final signatures. "Everything's set," Ms. Thompson announced. "We just need the signatures from Mr. Fitzgerald and Ms. Munro, and the sale is complete." Brandon's eyes flicked over the documents, and his hand trembled slightly as he signed. He cast furtive glances at Alexis, a swirl of emotions playing across his face: fear, anger, regret, pride. Finally, Alexis added her signature in a calm, unwavering motion. The notary sealed the paperwork. "Congratulations," she said. "You're officially the new owner." A small chorus of claps from Miss Thompson and Trent broke the silence. Alexis felt a surge of triumph, though she kept her outward composure. This was a victory not just for her, but for every barrier she'd shattered along the way. Brandon forced a tight smile, muttering a subdued congratulations. Alexis nodded, eyes flashing with confidence. "Thank you. Now let's ensure a smooth operation going forward. I'll be spending some time here over the next few weeks to get to know the staff and streamline processes." It was at that moment that a commotion erupted in the corridor. A security guard burst into the lounge, eyes wide. "Mr. Fitzgerald, there's an issue out on the tarmac. One of our smaller jets radioed in some mechanical trouble after landing, and the runway supervisor wants your input." Brandon's scowl deepened. "Can't the ground crew handle it?" "It's an executive charter with high-profile passengers. They're complaining that we directed them to this hangar without the right clearance." Alexis, Trent, and the others exchanged looks. This was an immediate test of the hangar's management under her ownership. With a slight nod, Alexis stepped forward. "I'd like to accompany you," she told Brandon. He hesitated for a moment as though trying to find a reason to refuse, but he shrugged, not wanting to appear incompetent in front of the new owner. "Fine. Let's go." The August sun bore down mercilessly as they hurried toward a small private jet, an Embraer Phenom 300, with a glossy white exterior and gold stripes. The plane's pilot stood near the aircraft steps, angrily talking with a ground crew member, while a trio of passengers, 2 men in sharp suits and a woman in a designer dress, looked on impatiently. "They told us to land here," the pilot complained. "Then they said we can't offload because of some operational limit. We're stuck." Brandon's brow furrowed, and he stepped forward. "What's the problem?" The ground crew member, Miguel, pointed to the plane. "They have a mechanical issue with the landing gear sensor, so we want to tow them to the maintenance bay. But it's technically outside our service coverage. They only pay for standard service, not the premium package that includes mechanical breakdown coverage. We can't just do repairs without the right contractual arrangement." One of the passengers, a tall man with a thick accent, cut in. "We're willing to pay whatever is necessary. We just need to get it fixed. We have a meeting in Atlanta in under an hour." Miguel turned to Brandon. "We need your authorization to help them, and we have to confirm who's paying for it." Brandon glanced at Alexis from the corner of his eye, clearly torn between showing he was still in charge versus deferring to his new boss. Alexis caught his hesitation and stepped in swiftly. "This is how we'll proceed," she said firmly, her voice projecting authority. "Escort the passengers into the lounge area so they can cool down and wait comfortably. Have the pilot come with you, Miguel, and fill out the necessary forms. If the sensor fix is straightforward, let's handle it. We'll bill them accordingly. The last thing we want is disgruntled clients or negative press about a new management takeover." Brandon's eyebrows shot up at her competence. For a moment it seemed he might contradict her. But when he saw the passengers nodding in gratitude, he swallowed his pride. "Yes, do that," he finally said, echoing Alexis's instructions. "Quickly." Miguel hustled into action. The passengers, relieved, thanked Alexis. "Wait, who are you?" the tall man in the suit asked. "Alexis Monroe," she answered with a warm smile.
"Owner of this hangar, and soon to be your favorite stop in Atlanta. I apologize for the inconvenience." They nodded, impressed by her confidence and clarity. Alexis turned to Brandon. "Shall we?" He gave her a curt nod. "Sure. Let's see if we can expedite repairs." As they walked, Trent, who had followed quietly, shot Alexis an approving grin. She had handled her first crisis with deft assurance, but behind the success of that moment, tensions between her and Brandon simmered beneath the surface, ready to boil over. 2 days later, Alexis returned to the hangar's administrative office.
She had spent most of that time in meetings with various department heads, learning about supply inventories, scheduling software fueling protocols, and other essential operations. Trent was busy finalizing legal details, while Ms. Thompson and the rest of Alexis's staff were setting up her new on-site office. Brandon Fitzgerald had been uncharacteristically subdued, but Alexis sensed it was more of a forced politeness than genuine respect. She noted the subtle signs, the clenched jaw whenever she gave instructions, the frequent sidelong glares, his perfunctory compliance. He hadn't apologized for his initial rudeness, nor had he shown genuine enthusiasm for her leadership. Late that afternoon, Alexis decided to review the staff's HR files. She wanted to understand the structure of the workforce, how they were hired, and whether the hangar was operating under fair labor practices. She took a seat in Brandon's office, vacant at the moment, and began scanning the digital files. Half an hour into her review, she stumbled upon something that made her frown, a suspicious pattern of frequent turnover among certain employees in the fueling department. She dug deeper, noticing that employees of color, especially women, had a much shorter average tenure and had left under questionable circumstances. Some indicated they were fired for performance issues that weren't detailed, while others had apparently quit due to personal reasons. A cold knot formed in Alexis's stomach. She was familiar with that code language from her own career. People from marginalized groups often faced harassment, under-the-table discrimination, and eventually left with vague paperwork that masked the real issues. She scrolled through the notes. Employee number 1. Terminated after repeated tardiness. Employee number 2 resigned abruptly after conflict with manager. Employee number 3. No explanation given. File incomplete. Even more striking was the pattern. Each of these individuals had filed at least one informal complaint about a hostile work environment. Yet there was no official record of any follow-up or investigation. The manager signatures for all these files, Brandon Fitzgerald. Rage and sadness churned in Alexis. This was deeper than just a rude first impression. Brandon seemed to be part of a cycle of racial and possibly gender-based bias at the hangar, pushing out employees who didn't fit his narrow comfort zone. She could almost guess the story he used: intimidation, micromanagement, or open hostility, until they either quit or were fired under flimsy pretenses. She was so immersed in the files that she didn't notice Brandon entering the office. "Ms. Monroe," he said stiffly, halting in the doorway. "Looking for something?" Her head snapped up, expression steeled. She exited the HR program and met his gaze. "Yes, actually. I'm familiarizing myself with staff history and noticed a concerning pattern in turnover rates." Brandon visibly tensed. "What about it?" Alexis studied his face. "It seems like there have been multiple complaints about harassment or a hostile work environment, but none appear to have been investigated or resolved." Brandon stiffened further. "Those were trouble employees," he said dismissively. "People who couldn't handle the rigors of aviation work. You know how it is. Some just aren't a good fit." Her eyes narrowed. "I've led successful operations for years. Mr. Fitzgerald and I know the difference between incompetent staff and a toxic work culture. I'm hoping you can explain why none of these concerns were followed up." A flush crept across Brandon's face. "I handled them in-house before they escalated." By firing them, Alexis retorted quietly. He gave a mirthless chuckle. "Look, Ms. Monroe, you might have built a big business, but the aviation field, especially private hangar operations, is different. It demands discipline. If someone doesn't fit, they're out. That's how I maintain standards." His insinuation questioning her experience was crystal clear. Alexis felt her frustration spike. "Discipline is one thing," she said icily. "Discrimination is another. I won't allow toxic practices under my ownership. We'll be conducting a thorough HR audit. I expect full cooperation." Brandon's jaw twitched. "Fine," he ground out. "But you'll see everything was by the book." Alexis rose from the chair, gathering her belongings. "Then you should have nothing to worry about." She brushed past him, fully aware their conflict was now more than personal. It had become an ethical battle over workplace fairness. Later that evening, Alexis called Trent and summarized her findings. He agreed that an external HR consultant should be brought in to investigate. The plan was set in motion. Alexis wouldn't tolerate a manager who marginalized others, especially when she had spent her life fighting those very prejudices. She'd handle him with facts, data, and the undeniable truth. The next week was a whirlwind. An external HR consulting firm arrived, quietly conducted interviews, reviewed files, and made discreet inquiries. Rumors spread through the hangar. Some employees were visibly anxious, while others looked relieved, grateful that someone was finally shining a light on the workplace dynamics. Brandon put on a facade of cooperation, but Alexis caught the seething resentment in his eyes whenever she passed him in the hallway. She had set up a temporary office near the main administrative area, determined to be hands-on until the dust settled. One hot afternoon, Alexis was alone in the staff break room, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge when Brandon walked in. No one else was around. The air felt thick with unspoken tension. "What are you doing here?" he asked bluntly. She turned, eyebrows raised. "Getting water," she said deliberately, undercutting his aggressiveness with a calm demeanor. He took a step closer. "You know what I mean." She met his stare, refusing to back down. "I own this hangar. I'll be here as often as I deem necessary." He exhaled sharply, looking torn between rage and desperation. "This used to be a place where I called the shots. People listened to me. They respected me. But ever since you showed up, everything's changed." "Respect is earned, Brandon," Alexis said quietly. It's not demanded. And from what I've seen, you confuse fear with respect." He laughed bitterly. "What would you know about managing an aviation facility? You might have money, might have built a corporation, but you don't know the first thing about how this place runs, and now you're turning everyone against me." She squared her shoulders. "No one's turning against you. Your own actions are catching up to you. If you've overseen discriminatory or hostile practices, you're responsible for that. Not me. And I do know something about aviation. I'm a licensed pilot and have significant experience in cargo logistics." He stared at her, disbelief and indignation swirling on his face. "Fine. Do what you want. Fire me if that's what you came for." Alexis's expression remained composed. "If that's what's necessary for the well-being of this hangar, then yes. But the investigation will show if that's the case." For a moment, they stood in silence, the faint hum of the soda machine, the only sound. Brandon's lips curled. "You're not just taking my job," he hissed, voice dripping venom. "You're destroying everything. I've worked my entire life to get here. And then you walk in with your checkbook." Anger flared in Alexis. "You can't lay your failures at my feet. I earned my right to be here. I'm giving you a chance to prove yourself, but you insist on seeing me as the enemy. That's on you." Before he could respond, the break room door opened and 2 staff members walked in, conversation dying as they saw the tension in the air. Alexis picked up her water bottle and stepped away. "Excuse me," she said, softly, heading for the door. As she left, she heard Brandon mutter curses under his breath. Within 2 weeks, the HR consultant delivered a preliminary report. Alexis and Trent, along with Ms. Thompson, reviewed it in a closed-door meeting. The findings were damning. Multiple employees reported discriminatory comments, microaggressions, and a pattern of intimidation led by Brandon Fitzgerald. One former staffer, a talented aircraft mechanic, had written a detailed account of being bullied out of her job after she reported racism from a co-worker. Another staffer had kept a record of hateful remarks scrawled on her locker. All of these complaints had gone ignored or were dismissed as misunderstandings by Brandon. The final recommendation was clear. Brandon Fitzgerald was a liability. His management style created a hostile environment. If Alexis allowed him to remain, she risked lawsuits, low morale, and potential operational incidents due to a demoralized staff. Late that evening, Alexis sat alone in her private office, the twinkling runway lights visible through the windows. Her heart felt heavy. She believed in second chances, but the level of damage documented in the report was too grave to ignore. She picked up her phone and dialed Brandon's extension. After a few rings, he answered. "Miss Monroe." His voice was cautious. "Please come to my office," she said simply. "Now." A few minutes later, Brandon arrived, his expression guarded. Trent and Miss Thompson were seated, the HR report in front of them. Alexis gestured for Brandon to sit. "We've concluded the investigation," Alexis began. She slid the summary toward him. He glanced at it, face blanching as he caught sight of the recommendations. They twisted everything he blurted. Those employees were... "Stop," Alexis said, firmly raising a hand. "I read the full report. So did Trent and Ms. Thompson. The evidence is overwhelming." Brandon's eyes flicked to Trent, who observed him with a calm, lawyerly gaze. Ms. Thompson simply looked disappointed. "Due to your role in perpetuating a hostile work environment," Mr. Fitzgerald, Alexis continued, "I have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately." He slammed a fist on the table, making Ms. Thompson jump. You can't do this." I can," Alexis interjected, voice resolute. "I'm the owner. We'll pay you any legally owed severance. Security will escort you to collect your belongings." Brandon's face twisted with fury and desperation. He rose to his feet, pointing an accusatory finger at Alexis. "This place will fall apart without me. You think you know how to run it, but you have no clue. You come in here with your money and your self-righteous attitude." Trent stood, stepping between them. "That's enough," he said sternly. But Brandon was past reason. "You're going to regret this," he spat, glaring at Alexis as though she were his mortal enemy. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Alexis locked her gaze on him. "I've dealt with bullies and bigots my entire life. You're not special." Brandon's face contorted, and for a moment it looked like he might try something violent, but security, already alerted, appeared at the door. Resigned, Brandon grabbed his things, shot one last hateful look at Alexis, and stormed out, flanked by guards. When he was gone, the room felt lighter, as if a storm cloud had passed. Ms. Thompson exhaled shakily. "What a scene." Trent patted Alexis's shoulder. "You did the right thing." She stared at the door, feeling both relief and sadness. "I know," she said, softly, "but I wish it hadn't come to this." Yet deep down, she also felt vindicated. In her earliest days, when she was overlooked, condescended to, forced to wait outside by men like Brandon, she had yearned for the power to shape her destiny. Now she had it, and she would wield it not out of spite, but in service of fairness and respect. 1 week later, word of Brandon's firing spread quickly. Staff morale took a turn for the better. People walked with lighter steps, no longer glancing over their shoulders. Alexis spent time reintroducing herself to employees, ensuring them that she would create a transparent, respectful environment. Several employees, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds, approached her, privately, to share how grateful they were. Some nearly cried, recounting how suffocating the atmosphere had been. Each story, though painful, reinforced Alexis's conviction that letting Brandon go was necessary. In a modest ceremony, Alexis formally announced her new director of operations, Naomi Green, a seasoned aviation expert who not only had the qualifications, but also the empathy to run a workplace that valued everyone. Applause erupted, echoing in the hangar that Alexis now owned. Her journey had not been easy, but the sense of rightness of a place, finally free from a toxic leader, resonated throughout the facility. Just when Alexis Monroe began to feel the hangar settling under her leadership, as if the weight of change was finally being absorbed and accepted, an unexpected storm gathered on the horizon. It started with whispers, muttered comments among staff, an unusual number of calls coming in about price inquiries, and then a sharply worded memo from one of their long-time corporate clients, considering more cost-efficient alternatives nearby. Please advise on any updates to your service structure. Naomi Green. Now the newly appointed Director of Operations was the first to voice the concern. "Something's not right," she told Alexis during their daily briefing. "The drop-off in inquiries, the competitors' pricing, it's too sudden, too strategic. This isn't just normal market competition." Alexis frowned, leaning over the operations table. "You think someone's targeting us?" Naomi nodded grimly. "I think Brandon isn't done." It didn't take long to confirm. Through a trusted industry contact, Alexis learned that a rival aviation firm was rapidly constructing a new private hangar facility just 10 miles outside Atlanta. The twist: it was being spearheaded by an anonymous investor. but paperwork revealed the name B. Fitzgerald listed as a consultant, Brandon Fitzgerald. The same man she had fired for perpetuating a hostile work environment was now working with a shadowy backer from the Northeast, an old money magnate with ties to cutthroat real estate and a grudge against modern corporate ethics. Their plan was clear: launch a rival hangar, undercut Alexis's pricing, and siphon her clients. The betrayal stung not because of Brandon's vendetta, she had expected that, but because he was so willing to sabotage everything, including the safety standards of aviation, just to see her fail. Rather than panic, Alexis got to work. Her first move was outreach. She personally called every top-tier client, not delegating the task to assistants or managers. "I want you to hear this from me," she told them. "We are aware of new competitors, but we don't cut corners and we don't gamble with safety. Our standards remain sky-high, and so does our dedication to you." The sincerity of her words, combined with her reputation for transparency and excellence, reassured many clients. Still, some smaller accounts began to trickle toward the rival. After all, cheap fuel and maintenance held appeal until something went wrong. And it did. Less than a month after Brandon's rival hangar opened, an incident shook the aviation community. A mid-sized private jet had to make an emergency landing after suffering engine failure caused by faulty maintenance. The mechanic assigned to the jet had neither the certifications nor the hours logged to handle that class of aircraft. A client was nearly killed, and lawsuits erupted overnight. The press descended like vultures. Cut-rate hangar. Nearly causes disaster, screamed the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Photos of the scorched runway circled social media, along with angry statements from former clients. Meanwhile, at Alexis's hangar, calm reigned. That same afternoon, reporters showed up outside her facility gates, begging for a comment. Alexis could have gloated. She could have said, "This is what happens when you follow a bitter man off a cliff." But she didn't. Instead, she gave a brief press statement that went viral for all the right reasons. "We are deeply saddened to hear about the incident. Our thoughts are with the crew and passengers involved. If there's anything we can do to help, resources, technical assistance, even temporary housing for displaced flights, we're here. Aviation is about trust, and every facility has a responsibility to honor that." Her calm compassion stood in stark contrast to the chaos Brandon's team had unleashed. One by one, clients who had left began calling back. Some apologized, others booked immediately. Her reputation wasn't just intact, it was now bulletproof. A week later, Naomi entered her office holding a printout. "You'll want to see this." It was a formal shutdown notice for Brandon's hangar. The FAA had issued multiple citations. The financial backer pulled out. Brandon, humiliated and drowning in legal threats, had vanished from public view. A few anonymous posts on aviation forums hinted at him blaming a certain woman for everything, but no one took them seriously. Alexis sat back in her chair, exhaling slowly. She wasn't vindictive, but the poetic symmetry wasn't lost on her. A man who once told her to wait outside had built a house of glass and then hurled rocks from within. Later that evening, as she stood alone on the balcony of her new executive suite, the city lights of Atlanta sparkling in the distance, Alexis reflected on what it all meant. This had never been just about buying a hangar. It was about transforming an industry, one that too often whispered behind closed doors rather than spoke truth in the open. One that underestimated people like her. Naomi stepped beside her with 2 glasses of ginger ale. "To staying in the sky," she said, raising her glass. Alexis smiled, and never letting the ground pull you back. Their glasses clinked beneath the roar of an incoming jet, overhead a sound Alexis would never stop loving. She had survived the test. No, she had flown through it, and the sky was still hers. With Brandon Fitzgerald disgraced and the rival hangar operation collapsing under the weight of its own negligence, peace finally returned to Alexis Monroe's world, or at least a version of it. But even in victory, Alexis understood something few people ever learn, that triumph isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it walks on soft feet, looks you in the mirror, and simply nods. The hangar now thrived. Corporate jets rolled in daily transporting executives, entertainers, dignitaries. The lounge bustled with travelers, the once tense air replaced with laughter conversations and the low hum of productivity. Staff who had once walked on eggshells now strode with purpose. There were new hires, many of whom had been overlooked elsewhere, and returning faces who had previously fled Brandon's toxic rule. The air of tension that used to cloud the facility had lifted as if someone had finally opened the windows after a long, stifling storm. And Alexis. She remained at the heart of it all, not just as the owner, but as a visible, steady leader. On one particular morning, nearly 2 months after her first standoff on the tarmac, Alexis stood in almost the same spot. The Georgia sun beamed overhead, but instead of feeling oppressive, it felt like a spotlight shining on all she had built. Staff passed by, greeting her warmly. "Morning, Ms. Monroe. Thanks for backing us. You made this place better." Each comment, no matter how casual, was a small beam of light. Each smile was a reminder that leadership wasn't just about decisions and capital. It was about courage, empathy, and showing up day after day. She spotted Naomi by the fueling bay clipboard in hand, giving directions to 2 technicians. Naomi looked up, caught Alexis's eye, and offered a subtle nod. It was their silent language now. Things were running, and they were running right. That afternoon, Alexis left the airport grounds and returned to where her story had begun, not as a mogul or media personality, but as a curious little girl sitting on the curb of her southwest Atlanta neighborhood, watching planes pass overhead. This time, she wasn't watching. She was speaking. The after-school program she funded had invited her to speak to a room full of girls aged 10 to 16, most of them black or Latina, all bright-eyed and eager. They didn't care about stock portfolios or real estate. They wanted to know how. How did you know you could do it? Weren't you scared? What do you do when people say you're not good enough? Alexis didn't give them a business lecture. She gave them stories. She told them about her mother, Clara, who used to clean offices before sunrise and serve diner burgers until her knees ached. About her father, who missed birthdays while hauling freight across the country just to keep the lights on. About the scholarships, the rejection letters, the teachers who underestimated her, and the ones who didn't. She spoke about dreaming big and being underestimated bigger, about being told to wait outside, about the fire that burned in her chest that day, not out of rage, but out of knowing. Knowing that one day she wouldn't knock on doors. She'd build them. The girls leaned in, hanging on every word, and as Alexis finished, she could feel it. Something deeper than applause. A spark. A girl in the front row whispered, "I want to fly too." Alexis knelt beside her and said, "Then don't stop running toward the sky." Later back at the hangar, Alexis returned for one final walkthrough. The evening crew had just clocked in, and the staff lounge buzzed with friendly chatter and late dinners. She walked the wide corridors, past polished floors and humming machines, the entire facility now a living rhythm under her guidance. As she passed the security checkpoint, a young mechanic looked up from his clipboard. Working late again. Ms. Monroe. Just checking things, she replied with a soft smile. He hesitated. Thanks for giving us a voice. She paused. Thank you for trusting I would. He gave a grateful nod and returned to his checklist. Moments later, Naomi found her standing near the hangar's glass-paneled wall overlooking the runway. We just booked a maintenance contract with a VIP charter company, Naomi said. 3-year deal. They said they trust us more than anyone else now. Alexis smiled faintly. Trust. That's everything. She placed a hand on the cool glass, watching as a jet prepared for takeoff. The engines roared to life. Its lights flared against the runway. A crescendo of sound filled the air. You know what I've realized, Alexis said. Naomi looked over. What's that winning isn't just about proving people wrong. It's about creating space for yourself and for everyone who comes after you. Naomi nodded slowly, deeply moved. You didn't just take over a hangar. You changed the air inside it. Alexis didn't respond immediately. She was watching the jet now, wheels leaving the tarmac, climbing higher, brighter, lighter. That jet, once a distant dream for a girl from a cramped home in southwest Atlanta, was now part of her world. And there was something symbolic about that flight. Something Alexis knew she'd never forget. She had arrived. And she wasn't done flying. Sometimes life's runway is riddled with delays, prejudice, and turbulence. But as Alexis Monroe's journey reminds us, determination and integrity can triumph against the worst of odds. From a dismissed nobody to the proud owner of a major airport hangar, Alexis soared beyond the barriers meant to keep her grounded. She didn't just claim her own seat at the table, she built a new table, inviting others to join her in a workplace of respect and equality. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the power of perseverance and the importance of standing up against discrimination, help us keep the conversation alive. Like this video, share it with friends who need inspiration, and subscribe for more stories of triumph and transformation. Your support helps spread these empowering messages and can spark change in places where it's needed most. Let's keep flying higher together.